Rushing desperately to his exhausted wife's bedside, a frantic man cries out for his beloved Katie. An attendant carefully hands him a bundled infant, urging the awestruck father to hold their newborn daughter. Resting weakly against the pillows, Katie smiles brightly and suggests naming the beautiful little girl Louise. Gazing down at the precious life in his arms, he warmly agrees that it is an absolutely perfect and lovely name. In that precise, fateful instant, a massive flood of memories from a completely different past life violently crashes into his mind. Staring at his newborn, he fiercely vows to protect his beloved daughter Louise from ever becoming the doomed Villainess. Thus begins a desperate father's grand struggle against the sinister threads of destiny, questioning if she is truly the Villainess. The sprawling, majestic kingdom of Bernard stands proudly against a bright and sweeping skyline. Powerful magical barriers protect its towns from the 39 treacherous, monster-filled dungeons lurking within its shadowed borders. This very world is the setting of a popular Otome game called Azure Maiden's Fantasia, affectionately known as Alphon. He introduces himself as Wolfgang Malleus Zonter, the acting head of the prestigious ducal house Lehmann. Fully aware of his incredible reincarnation, he accepts his identity as the father of the game's infamous Villainess, Louise. Before his rebirth, he lived out his days as a typical, obsessive all-genre gamer who consumed every title he could find. Like many romance games, Alphon centered around a captivating heroine sweeping handsome men off their feet. However, the game truly captivated his attention with its surprisingly deep and intricate dungeon-crawling gameplay mechanics. Originally drawn in strictly for the combat mechanics, the rich story hooked him so deeply that he even purchased the official art book. Players take control of a pure-hearted saintess named Monica as she trains, travels the lands, and builds relationships with her dashing suitors. Monica's ultimate, heroic mission is to venture into the kingdom's dangerous dungeons and quell the violent monster rampages emerging from within. Tragically, Wolfgang's own daughter Louise is heavily fated to become Monica's bitter rival for the crown prince's affection. Her story ends in sheer heartbreak and disgrace when the prince publicly shatters their engagement and completely banishes her from the kingdom. Knowing this sinister script by heart, Wolfgang grimly reflects on his daughter's devastating downfall as the Villainess. Suddenly, his internal narration is cut completely short by the piercing, agonized screams of a toddler shrieking in the present. In the Grand Manor hallway, an older butler named Christoph watches helplessly as a battered maid struggles to calm the thrashing child. Wolfgang approaches the chaotic, tear-filled scene, gently calling out to his deeply distressed daughter Lulu. Kneeling down to her eye level, he softly pleads with Lulu to calm herself and explain what is wrong so he can help. Screaming in pure, unbridled defiance, the weeping toddler lashes out and violently slaps Wolfgang across his cheek. Ignoring his presence completely, Lulu wails desperately for her mother. Wolfgang solemnly reveals that Cassandra, his wife and Lulu's mother, passed away from a sudden epidemic just 1 month ago. Rubbing his stinging face, Wolfgang sighs and sharply reminds Christoph not to call him young master while the anxious maids fret over his injury. Chuckling softly, he remarks on the surprisingly heavy punch of a child and apologizes to the similarly bruised staff. He shoots the older butler a tired look, silently repeating his immense disdain for the formal title. Christoph gently suggests giving the little miss some space, astutely observing that she still cannot accept Lady Cassandra's death. Wolfgang adamantly refuses to abandon her, fiercely declaring his solemn promise to Katie to always be there for their grieving child. He deeply acknowledges that the original in-game Wolfgang kept his distance, strictly adhering to the noble tradition of not directly raising one's own children. Refusing to repeat the tragic sins of his virtual counterpart, he resolves to forge a new path and calls out for Lulu once more. Striding determinedly through the halls, he remembers that his past life memories only triggered on the exact day of her birth. The opulent, sunlit corridors of the Grand Lehmann estate stand eerily empty as he frantically searches for the runaway girl. Pausing anxiously by a large glass door, he nervously reasons that she could not have left the sprawling manor on her own. A heavy knot of worry tightens in his chest as he reminds himself that she is merely 4 years old. Suddenly, a hopeful thought pierces his rising panic, and he wonders if she fled outside to the garden. Outside, the tiny girl stands completely isolated among the massive rose bushes, heavily burdened and confused by her mother's sudden absence. Catching sight of her small frame, Wolfgang lets out a massive breath of relief and excitedly calls her name. Approaching her with gentle steps, he expresses his profound gratitude to the heavens at finally tracking her down. Looking around the blooming flowers, he softly reminds her that her mother truly loved this tranquil place too. Extending a warm, inviting hand, he gently asks her to come inside because Kristoff is worried and the creeping cold is setting in. Instead of taking his hand, Lulu violently swats it away, screaming through her tears that she refuses to live in a house without her mommy. The sheer force of the toddler's emotional strike catches him entirely off guard, sending his glasses flying off his face into the grass. Instantly realizing the heavy weight of her angry outburst, the young girl's rage evaporates into a terrified, sharp gasp. She stares wide-eyed at the fallen spectacles, a sudden crushing wave of guilt washing over her innocent face. Trembling with immense regret, she looks up at him with tear-filled eyes and timidly stammers out a quiet apology to her daddy. Staring up with wide, uncertain eyes, the young girl quietly watches the heavy tears stream down her grieving father's face as he weeps in the garden. Choking back his overwhelming sorrow, he tearfully confesses that losing Cassandra, his beloved Katie, fractures his heart with just as much excruciating agony. Weeping openly, he silently reflects that the artificial nature of this world being a mere video game and the cold, political origins of their arranged marriage meant absolutely nothing in the end. Crushed beneath the suffocating weight of his immense grief, he desperately demands to know why the universe would rip her away so cruelly. Vivid, vibrant memories of Katie's radiant, joyful laughter, as she affectionately called him, Wool, flood his turbulent mind, firmly cementing the undeniable truth that he had completely fallen for her and truly loved her. His thoughts wildly cascade through countless cherished moments of their profound bond, painting a deeply vivid picture of a deeply devoted couple deeply entrenched in authentic love. Clutching onto his fleeting hope, he desperately clings to the profound memory of the fateful day she turned her warm, breathtaking smile toward both him and their daughter Lulu. Recalling their absolute, picture-perfect happiness as a united family, a fleeting vision of their shared bliss intensely pierces through his overwhelming misery. Suddenly, the idyllic vision violently shatters into the devastating memory of her horrifying, sickness-induced exhaustion, entirely replacing his joyful nostalgia with a freezing jolt of sheer panic. A profound, hollow despair ruthlessly settles into his bones as he heartbreakingly realizes that the magnificent day she returns with her brilliant, sunflower-like smile will tragically never come. Gently pulling him from the dark abyss of his swirling memories, the tiny toddler reaches out her small hand and softly pats her kneeling father's deeply bowed head in the sunlit garden. Utterly shocked by the tender, unexpected gesture, he jolts slightly and gazes up through his stinging tears, breathlessly whispering his beloved daughter's name. Trembling with genuine remorse, Lulu stares softly back at him and sincerely apologizes to her stunned father. Grappling with her immense, childlike confusion, she quietly admits she lashed out because she mistakenly believed he wasn't truly sad that her mommy was gone forever. Heartbreakingly referencing the bleak, solemn day they laid Katie to rest, she reveals her terrible misconception stemmed entirely from the fact that he stubbornly refused to cry at the funeral. Gently pressing his forehead to hers in a profound display of paternal affection, he asks Lulu if she remembers the massive, imposing crowd of people who attended the service that day. Maintaining a deeply soothing and empathetic tone, he softly explains to his surprised child that some of those gathered individuals were incredibly dangerous and inherently bad people. He grimly elaborates that malicious nobles were actively scheming against their vulnerable house during Cassandra's funeral, meaning he, as the acting duke, absolutely could not afford to display a single ounce of weakness. Gently acknowledging her deeply valid hurt, he explains that he had to maintain a flawlessly composed facade to prevent those political vultures from causing trouble, even though it tragically made him look like he didn't care. Seeing her eyes widen in sudden, innocent realization, he quickly reassures her that she doesn't need to understand the complex political landscape just yet, dismissing the heavy burden as simply being Daddy's demanding job. Desperately eager to shift the heavy, melancholic atmosphere, he playfully changes the subject and asks if she wants to explore a completely secret room hidden within the manor. Apologizing once more for violently knocking his glasses into the grass earlier, she watches as he awkwardly but gratefully scrambles to retrieve the spectacles. Stepping back inside the opulent, sprawling estate, he ceremoniously swings open a heavy door to reveal an intimate, secluded chamber completely covered in beautifully framed portraits. Lifting the awestruck toddler effortlessly into his supportive arms, he smiles warmly as she gazes around the spectacular gallery and unleashes a massive, delighted gasp of pure wonder. The intricately carved frames meticulously showcase an array of breathtaking, incredibly lifelike paintings depicting the late Cassandra and her precious newborn child. Overjoyed by the incredibly beautiful sight, Lulu wildly cheers that her beloved mommy is absolutely everywhere. She stares transfixed at the massive collection of gorgeous artwork decorating the vast, impressive walls, absorbing the incredibly warm, loving atmosphere. Feeling a distinct twinge of deeply rooted regret, he softly admits he should have brought her here much sooner, confessing that a foolish sense of embarrassment held him back. Tilting her head in profound, adorable confusion, the little girl innocently questions why her father would ever feel embarrassed about such a magical, beautiful space. Flushing slightly under her intense, curious scrutiny, he nervously reveals the massive secret that he personally painted every single canvas hanging around them. Utterly mind-blown by this incredible revelation, she enthusiastically demands to know if he truly created all of them himself, prompting a deeply bashful confirmation from the flustered Duke. Basking in the glorious, overwhelming presence of her mother's painted visage, the tiny girl breathes out a sincere, deeply reverent compliment praising his amazing skill. Humbly waving off the immense, glowing praise, he insists he really isn't that exceptionally talented at the fine arts. Gazing longingly at the vibrant, lifelike strokes, a deeply comforted Lulu softly murmurs that the beautiful room makes it feel like her mommy is truly still home. Struck profoundly to his core by her incredibly innocent and healing words, Wolfgang stares at her in absolute awe before a deeply genuine, completely relieved smile finally graces his exhausted features. Pointing out his very first attempt, he explains he had to paint so many for specific reasons and has loved the craft since his past life, though he self-deprecatingly admits he never improved, a comment Lulu hilariously calls rough. Fiercely claiming her rightful territory, the little girl enthusiastically declares that any portrait featuring her automatically belongs to her, eagerly asking to take it. Delighted by her boundless enthusiasm, he happily grants her permission to hang one in her bedroom, sending a thrilling jolt of pure excitement completely through her tiny frame. Humming thoughtfully to herself, the young girl intensely scrutinizes the vast gallery, adorably debating which magnificent piece she should ultimately choose. Framing a tiny square with his long fingers, he brilliantly suggests creating a miniature, highly portable canvas so she can carry the precious memory of her mother around absolutely everywhere. Expanding on the excellent idea, he notes that a beautifully crafted locket pendant might also serve as the perfect, elegant vessel for the sentimental art. Pondering the intense logistical challenge of painting something so incredibly small, he suddenly realizes he desperately wants a miniature portrait of Katie and Lulu to keep constantly with him as well. Displaying her sharp, observant nature, Lulu innocently asks why he doesn't already have a grand painting featuring both him and mommy together. Sighing softly at the logistical paradox, he practically explains that arranging such a beautiful portrait is incredibly tricky since he is the sole artist behind the brush. Completely unfazed by the obvious artistic challenge, the demanding toddler stubbornly insists she desperately wants a beautiful painting featuring both of her beloved parents together. Caving immediately to her incredibly sweet, undeniable demands, he agrees to the massive challenge but playfully warns her absolutely not to complain since he is notoriously terrible at self-portraits. Suddenly adopting a much more serious, deeply solemn tone, he softly calls her name to firmly capture her undivided attention. Reminding her of the chaotic, deeply unfortunate events earlier in the hallway, he gently points out that while she apologized to him, she still owes a massive apology to someone else. Instantly understanding her required mission, she eagerly agrees to make extremely prompt amends, prompting him to smile warmly and instruct her to visit his study afterward. Bursting with newly restored, boundless energy, the tiny girl patters rapidly down the grand, echoing hallway to sincerely apologize to the deeply worried staff. While diligently reviewing paperwork at his desk, the bespectacled nobleman is interrupted by a polite knock and an offer of coffee. He is informed that the young little miss has been making her rounds apologizing to all the staff, an update he receives with a sigh of relief as he thanks the elderly butler, Christoph. Christoph, pouring a fresh cup of tea, gently reminds the young master that it is their duty to endure the situation, noting that the staff all received bruises from the child's violent tantrums in the wake of Cassandra's tragic death. Expressing his deep desire for their household to live peacefully rather than in a tense and cold environment, the young man laments the constant presence of people around nobles and admits he despises pretending that enduring such abuse is somehow normal. Christoph agrees quietly, observing that the young master must have shown the little miss the special memory room. Smiling softly with his eyes closed, the young man confirms that she absolutely loved the room, feeling a pang of regret that he should have shared it with her much sooner. Christoph playfully apologizes while addressing him properly as Master Wolfgang, though Wolfgang immediately groans in annoyance, demanding to know how many times he must repeat that he is no longer a kid and should not be called young master. Even as the butler notes, he seems to have finally found some peace himself. Wolfgang's peaceful moment is suddenly interrupted by a memory of a gentle voice calling out his nickname, Wool. The narrative shifts to a solemn flashback where a bedridden, smiling woman named Katie warmly greets Wolfgang, asking if he came to visit her too. Katie gently chides him for always overworking himself and asks with genuine concern if he is sleeping well and eating properly, to which Wolfgang can only offer a hesitant, dismissive response. Seeing right through his meager attempt to claim he is fine, Katie definitively tells him that he is not taking care of himself at all. Tears prick Wolfgang's eyes as Katie confesses her deepest fear that once she is gone, he will simply chase after her into death, admitting how deeply she worries for him. Wolfgang breaks down crying, insisting he only acts like a crybaby in front of her, while she softly teases him for his tears. With a tender, fading smile, Katie asks her beloved Wool to come closer to her bedside. In her weakened state, she gently reveals that she has one final, incredibly important favor to ask of him. Staring up with desperate affection, she pleads with him to ensure that even if she is dead, he must never leave their little Lulu all alone in the world. As she begs Vol to protect their precious child, Wolfgang emotionally interrupts her, unable to bear hearing her use the word dead. She heartbreakingly reminds him of the joyful promise they made to take little Lulu on a beautiful family picnic this upcoming spring. Tears stream freely down Wolfgang's devastated face as he remembers their shared dream to watch their daughter grow up together side by side. With her fading breath, she specifically charges Wool with the solemn duty to protect Lulu for her sake. Katie softly reminds him that once she passes away, Lulu will only have him left in the world to rely on. Overcome with grief and absolute resolve, Wolfgang tearfully swears a binding vow that he will always protect Lulu. A peaceful, utterly relieved smile graces Katie's face as she softly asks him to promise her. Snapping back to the present day, the study door swings open to reveal a cheerful Lulu running in and shouting for her daddy, who warmly welcomes her back. Looking adorably apologetic, Lulu proudly announces that she said sorry to everyone, specifically apologizing for hitting her father and Christoph, earning warm praise for doing such a great job. Clenching her little fists with immense determination, Lulu brightly promises that she will study lots just so she can help Daddy. Beaming with overwhelming fatherly pride, Wolfgang silently tells his late wife Katie that their daughter is growing up fast, verbally thanking Lulu for her sweet dedication. Before tackling any studies, Christoph happily interjects to offer the energetic little girl some freshly prepared juice. The kindly butler hands over the goblet with a warm smile, telling her to enjoy it, and Lulu politely thanks Christoph for the treat. Watching her innocent joy, Wolfgang thinks to himself that this precious little Louise is the very last living piece of his beloved Katie. A dark, terrifying vision of a tragic future briefly crosses his mind, prompting Wolfgang to fiercely vow that if she is truly fated to walk the path of ruin, he will utterly destroy that fate no matter what it takes. Channeling the absolute devotion of the promise he made to Katie, Wolfgang happily opens his arms and calls Lulu to come to him. Catching his giggling daughter in a warm embrace, he internally swears that he will never, ever let their beloved daughter become a tragic villainess. 2 years swiftly pass since that pivotal resolution, bringing Lulu to the age of 6 where she officially begins her rigorous education as a proper young lady. Out in the sunny garden, a strict but polite governess instructs young Lady Louise on proper etiquette, teaching her to always approach her seat from the left side. Sitting at a nearby patio table, Wolfgang watches his daughter's etiquette lessons with a sparkling, comically exaggerated expression of absolute parental adoration. The peaceful observation is shattered when a young man slams his hands on the table, frantically ordering his brother to calm down because his face looks way too sickeningly doting right now, catching Wolfgang completely off guard. The narrative introduces this exasperated young man as Markus, a 17-year-old who is Wolfgang's younger brother by 12 years, who dryly notes that Wolfgang is still hopelessly spoiling Lulu. Wolfgang justifies his overwhelming affection by explaining that since their parents died in a tragic accident 11 years ago, his only real family left are Lulu and Markus, making the little girl undeniably adorable to him no matter what she does. Clearing his throat nervously, Markus explicitly asks Wolfgang to try and look serious for once because he came today specifically to ask a major favor. Instantly dropping his warm demeanor for a serious glare, Wolfgang flatly states that if the favor is about the title succession, the request is completely denied. Wolfgang firmly reminds his frustrated brother that Markus is the rightful heir to the Lehmann dukedom, which is the only reason Wolfgang is currently serving as the acting duke. It is revealed that Wolfgang's Count is currently acting as the Duke Regent and Guardian until Duke Markus Lehmann turns 18, at which point Wolfgang plans to return to his original Count title, an idea Markus visibly panics over by claiming he is not ready yet. Pushing the issue, Markus demands to know why their late parents chose Wolfgang to lead instead of him, prompting Wolfgang to calmly reply that Markus already knows the exact reason. Markus begrudgingly admits that it is because he cannot use magic at all, but argues passionately that Wolfgang is more than capable in every other conceivable area. Wolfgang grimly counters that in their society, true nobles are strictly expected to possess great magical power to legitimize their rule. Despite having immense mana and even being declared a saintess as a child, Wolfgang solemnly reveals that he was completely incapable of casting even the simplest barrier spell by the time he reached age 10. Because he was viewed as a failure with no practical magic, their parents decided they couldn't entrust the dukedom to Wolfgang and pinned all their hopes on Markus, even though Markus points out that Wolfgang has successfully managed the territory for over 10 years now. Desperate to avoid the responsibility, Markus argues that the people genuinely love Wolfgang and will become incredibly uneasy if some kid suddenly replaces their reliable leader. As Lulu joyfully bursts into the room calling for her uncle, Wolfgang waves off Markus's concerns with a confident smile, promising that he isn't giving everything up right away and that they will execute a smooth transition over the next few years. Lulu bursts into the room asking if he has finished studying, but quickly corrects herself, stating she came to greet him properly because she heard Uncle Markus was visiting. Markus stares with absolute exasperation at his brother, labeling him a doting father, while Wolfgang gazes back with sparkling intensity, completely enchanted by how cute his daughter is. Blinking in genuine confusion, Markus asks what they were talking about, and Lulu brightly explains they were just discussing how amazing her big brother is even though he cannot use magic. Markus recoils slightly, visibly stunned as he repeats her words regarding his brother's inability to use magic. Resting his chin thoughtfully on his hand, Wolfgang explains that while he doesn't know if it relates to his lack of magic, he discovered during his student days that his eyes are somewhat special, prompting Lulu to ask if her father's flames aren't actually magic. He clarifies that his eyes harbor the power of flame, meaning anything he sees and wills to burn will suddenly ignite, a phenomenon known as mystic eyes. Markus frustratingly confirms Lulu's confusion about why people deny it is magic, admitting that society refuses to recognize Wolfgang's flames as magic even though they are clearly produced by magical power. Adjusting his glasses with a darkened expression, Wolfgang notes that the power manifested when he was 17, and despite gaining better control, people still find it creepy that things burn just by him looking at them, requiring him to wear suppression glasses constantly. Leaning in with an excited spark in her eyes, Lulu proposes that if he simply pretended to use magic by holding a rod like the mages in picture books, people would finally see how amazing her father truly is. Markus stares at her in sheer shock while Wolfgang awkwardly covers his mouth, stammering out a hesitant reaction to his daughter's wild idea. Markus's face completely lights up with enthusiasm as he agrees it is a great idea, noting that a convincing act might effortlessly mimic the silent magic used by high-level sorcerers. Moved to dramatic tears by his daughter's thoughtful effort, Wolfgang covers his weeping face and praises her as the best daughter, while Markus angrily snaps at him to come to his senses. Lulu taps her chin thoughtfully, realizing a major flaw in her plan is that using a rod means he would have to carry it around with him all the time. Throwing her hands up excitedly, she pivots her strategy and proposes that he should just strike a super cool pose instead. Wolfgang sweats nervously, arguing that coming up with a pose on the spot is highly embarrassing, but Markus completely ignores his protests to officially commence a meeting to decide the perfect activation stance. Lulu beams up at her father, sweetly and innocently persuading him to agree by asking if striking a pose isn't fine. Markus thrusts his fist forward passionately, urging Wolfgang to use this opportunity to show up all the fools who have looked down on him for his lack of traditional magic. Wolfgang flatly rejects the idea, apologizing to Markus as he refuses to budge on the embarrassing pose, completely ignoring Markus's gleeful fantasy of Wolfgang restoring his honor and inheriting the dukedom. A solemn narration reveals that in the original lore of Awafen, Wolfgang took the duke title back from his younger brother, establishing his daughter Louise Lehmann as the duke's official daughter. Wolfgang internally reflects that if he inherits the dukedom completely like in the game, Lulu might be pushed onto the tragic villainous route, making his refusal to inherit a calculated form of resistance to protect her. Breaking the serious tension, Markus cheerfully shouts out the terrible pose name Anira, while striking a dramatic stance, which Lulu instantly shoots down as a bad one. Resting his chin on his hand with a sweat drop, Wolfgang silently accepts the chaotic situation, expressing confidence that his brother will become a splendid duke as long as they don't make the pose too weird. The scene transitions with a clear time skip of a few days, showing an exterior shot of a grand, elegant estate. Marquise Muller, hiding her smile behind a decorative fan, cheerfully announces that the excellent reputation of Zonter County has reached all the way to their own territory. Countess Becker chimes in to mention a specific design from Zonter County, recalling it as a pump, specifically engineered to draw water up from a well. Wolfgang laughs awkwardly, looking highly uncomfortable under the sudden, overwhelming wave of aristocratic praise. Countess Voigt excitedly adds that the pump is the absolute talk of their place too, prompting another noblewoman to express her dramatic surprise at the invention's popularity. Sitting stiffly with his teacup, Wolfgang modestly deflects the praise by claiming it was just a lucky idea, secretly noting to himself that his past life memories are occasionally very useful. A narration box establishes that today is the tea party Lulu was invited to, as the surrounding noblewomen playfully scold Wolfgang for being so incredibly modest. A young girl named Emma Fisher brightly asks her mother if all the children can go play out in the garden, revealing through Wolfgang's thoughts that this gathering is hosted by the friendly Fisher Marquis house. Marquise Fisher grants permission but strictly reminds the girls that they are young ladies now and must be extremely careful not to dirty their beautiful dresses. Lulu happily bids her father goodbye as she runs off to play, and Wolfgang waves back with a warm, genuinely loving smile. The surrounding noblewomen immediately begin swooning, whispering behind their fans about how lovely the daughter is and how remarkably handsome the father is. Wolfgang forces a rigid smile, internally screaming about how agonizingly uncomfortable this is since fathers normally never attend these girls' gatherings, desperately wondering what their compliments even mean. Panic strikes Wolfgang as Marquise Fisher playfully suggests he must keep an eye on Lady Louise alongside them, ruining his secret plan to simply kill time with Lord Fisher, who can only offer a helpless smile of solidarity. Completely surrounded by the gossiping noblewomen, Wolfgang sits stiffly at the table, agonizing over how he ended up in such a severely out-of-place situation. The tone shifts to sympathy as one of the ladies gently brings up the passing of Lady Cassandra, expressing how deeply worried they all were for his well-being. Looking at him with genuine, probing concern, she asks if he was too disheartened by the tragic, untimely loss. She warmly adds that the sight of Wolfgang and Cassandra so deeply in love was something their entire social circle truly admired. A soft, melancholic smile touches Wolfgang's face as he thanks them, admitting that after 2 years he has finally found his footing and is happy their love was perceived so beautifully by others. The mood shifts abruptly as the woman presses on, suggesting that even though Lady Louise is 6, the young girl must still feel incredibly lonely. Glancing at him coyly, she pointedly reminds him that Lord Zonter himself is still incredibly young. Taking a slow sip of tea, Wolfgang mentally berates himself for letting his guard down, fully realizing this conversation is a thinly veiled attempt to push him into taking a new wife since remaining a widower isn't an option for nobles. Smoothly deflecting the pressure, Wolfgang politely states that he paints pictures of Cassandra as a hobby to comfort his daughter, using it as a solid excuse to just wait and see for the time being. The ladies instantly latch onto this new information with excited squeals, demanding to see his paintings, leaving Wolfgang sweating bullets as he realizes he just dug his own social grave. He frantically tries to backtrack by claiming they are mere amateur paintings unfit for public viewing, but the women eagerly suggest hosting the next tea party at his mansion specifically to see them. The ladies suddenly gasp in absolute horror as a massive shadow falls over them, violently interrupting their leisurely tea party. A terrifying, blood-curdling scream for her mother rips through the tranquil estate grounds. Wolfgang looks back in sheer panic to see a massive flying monster swooping down upon a terrified Emma, frantically wondering why such a dangerous beast is in a place like this. A distant figure yells out to Madame Fisher in alarm as the entire situation instantly descends into life-threatening chaos. A panicked woman cries out to Lord Zonter, frantically warning him that it's better not to use magic because he might accidentally hit Lady Emma. She stares upward in absolute terror, screaming that if this crisis continues, the helpless Emma will surely be doomed. Adjusting his glasses with steady resolve, Zonter calmly steps forward and instructs the frantic woman to leave the situation entirely to him. Sizing up the aerial threat, Zonter urgently commands the black-haired guard knight to stand by near the monster's feet, warning that Emma will be seriously injured if she falls from that terrifying height. The stunned guard quickly snaps to attention with a resolute affirmation, completely understanding his critical mission to catch Lady Emma when she drops. Preparing his devastating spell, Zonter coolly explains that his mystic eyes only burn what he specifically sees and wills to burn, ensuring he can obliterate the monster without involving young Emma. A lethal spark of pure, crackling magic ignites intensely right beside Zonter's sharply focused eye. Dangling precariously from the monster's massive talons, the tearful little girl desperately screams for help. Unleashing his overwhelming power with a single, decisive word, Zonter coldly commands the wretched creature to burn. Engulfed in sudden, agonizing magical flames, the monstrous bird unleashes a horrific, ear-piercing screech. Someone below frantically screams Emma's name as the terrified girl lets out a sharp gasp. The weeping mother cries out for her daughter just as the quick-moving guard knight successfully catches the falling Emma safely in his strong arms. Breathing a heavy sigh of relief, Zonter notes with immense thankfulness that the young lady doesn't seem to have sustained any major injuries from the terrifying ordeal. A sudden, paralyzing wave of dread washes over Zonter as he frantically scans the area for his own daughter, terrified that something horrible happened to Lulu before Emma was even caught. He desperately demands an answer from the silent surroundings, his heart agonizing over the unbearable thought of Lulu being gone from his side too. Zonter's frantic panic abruptly melts into shock as he looks down to find the little girl quietly clinging to his leg. Expressing profound relief, he gently embraces the trembling girl and anxiously asks if she is safe and unhurt. Smiling warmly to soothe her, he reassures the deeply frightened girl that she doesn't need to be scared anymore because he has completely defeated the monster. Lulu's eyes sparkle with sudden, overwhelming awe as she calls him father, and enthusiastically praises how incredibly cool he looked in battle. Throwing her little hands up in pure excitement, she gleefully points out that he did the exact special pose he and Uncle Markus came up with, leaving Zonter momentarily stunned and embarrassed. Sparkling with absolute admiration and joy, Lulu beams up at him with the brightest, most heartwarming smile. Deeply moved by her innocent affection, Zonter smiles softly and thanks her, declaring earnestly that he wants to be a father she can truly be proud of. Zonter's sharp mind quickly shifts back to the bizarre crisis, questioning why a flying monster typically found in the mountain dungeon would suddenly appear here. Realizing the Fisher estate is located dangerously near the royal capital, he logically deduces that a strong defensive barrier should have been actively deployed. A group of tense guards and nobles gather cautiously in the stone courtyard to inspect the smoldering, massive carcass of the fallen bird monster. Lord Fisher approaches the scene breathlessly, expressing his endless, profound gratitude to Lord Zonter for his heroic intervention. The exhausted lord reveals a terrifying truth, explaining that another beast-type monster had actually appeared at the back stables and ruthlessly attacked his eldest daughter, Rena. Fisher explains that he had been desperately dealing with the stable monster this whole time, prompting shock from Zonter over the sudden revelation of a second deadly creature. Continuing his harrowing report, the shaken Fisher states he had just received word that a monster had shockingly appeared in the garden as well. He admits he was fully prepared to head to the stables without any hesitation, at least until he heard Zonter was already fighting the garden threat. Zonter respectfully urges the bowing Lord Fisher to raise his head, emphasizing that the most important thing is the safety of his daughters, who might not have survived otherwise. The immensely relieved father shares the physician's miraculous report, confirming that both daughters suffered only shallow wounds and will not even be left with scars. A profound, world-shattering realization suddenly strikes Zonter as his eye widens in pure astonishment. He remembers that in the original game's lore, Emma appears as a supporting fan character bearing a large facial scar, pinpointing this exact incident as the tragic event from before the main story. Recalling the game's dark backstory, he remembers Emma explaining that when she was 6, she was brutally attacked by a bird monster and fell from a high place. Zonter deduces that the game's original Wolfgang probably didn't attend this tea party, leading to a grim timeline where the older sister lost a leg and suffered a broken heart while being raised entirely by a hired nanny. Piecing the intricate puzzle together, he realizes that his direct intervention and tight coordination with Lord Fisher successfully reduced serious, life-altering injuries to mere light wounds. Overwhelmed by the staggering magnitude of this revelation, Zonter realizes he possesses the incredible power to actively change the future based entirely on his own actions. Suddenly breaking the tension, little Emma excitedly runs forward while happily shouting for her dear friend. Emma's relieved mother watches as the two young girls eagerly reunite, gently asking if Lulu is okay after the terrifying ordeal. Trying to put on a brave and tough face, the resilient Emma confidently declares that this much danger is absolutely nothing to worry about. The incredibly grateful mother then addresses Zonter, thanking him profusely and admitting that if she had fired her own magic back then, something terrible would have certainly happened. Zonter humbly agrees with her paralyzing hesitation, confessing that he wouldn't be confident in making a calm judgment either if his precious Lulu were the one in imminent danger. Smiling graciously with his eyes closed, he warmly brushes off her intense gratitude, softly insisting that her thanks are not necessary at all. The relieved parents stand proudly behind the energetic young girls, expressing immense gladness that both young ladies are safe, even though monsters appearing this close to the capital is a grave situation. Zonter gazes affectionately down at the joyful, peaceful scene with a soft, deeply reflective smile. Looking at Lulu's radiant, smiling face, he feels a profound sense of surging hope, truly believing he has finally seen a small glimmer of light for his beloved daughter's future as well. The entire Fisher family bows deeply and emphatically, loudly reiterating their immense and unending gratitude for his truly life-saving actions. Panicking slightly at their overwhelming and intense formality, Zonter flails his hands and insists they stop bowing, awkwardly reminding them he already received their thanks the other day. Desperately urging them to raise their heads, he humbly insists that he merely did what he was strictly supposed to do as the Duke's representative. Frantically waving her hands, Lulu apologizes profusely to Lady Louise for scaring her while insisting she is perfectly fine. Lady Louise laughs nervously at the energetic children, noting it was a struggle to stop them from tagging along, while Emma angrily protests being told to stay home. Lord Fisher smiles warmly, explaining that Lena made a full recovery because she stayed calm and fought back with magic during the monster attack. Scratching his cheek with an embarrassed chuckle, Fisher dismisses his own praise as just a doting father gushing over his strong-willed kid. Zonter immediately fires back with a confident smirk, declaring that he absolutely won't be beaten when it comes to fiercely gushing over their children. A sparkling Lulu interrupts the friendly banter, wide-eyed with awe as she mentions meeting the highly skilled Lady Lena before. Lady Louise gently pats Lulu's head, noting the lonely girl must envy older sisters, and warmly invites Zonter to visit again once things settle down. Zonter forces a strained, sweating smile as Louise excitedly reveals that his dashing, monster-slaying figure has become the popular talk among all the gossiping ladies. Smiling with pure, innocent pride, Lulu completely ignores her father's embarrassment and declares that everyone loves him because he is just so cool. Desperate to change the subject, Zonter clears his throat loudly and seriously asks if they have figured out why the monster appeared in the first place. The atmosphere instantly darkens as Zonter directs his intense, questioning gaze toward a suddenly serious Lord Fisher. Zonter gravely notes that a monster infiltrating a noble's magically protected estate near the royal capital is a deeply shocking and grave situation for the entire nation. Fisher's expression hardens as he reveals that their immediate investigation discovered one of the estate's barrier stones was broken. Pausing mid-sentence, Fisher's eyes narrow as he grimly reconsiders his own phrasing of the terrible incident. Correcting himself with absolute certainty, Fisher clarifies that the barrier stone wasn't merely broken, but intentionally destroyed by someone. Zonter's eyes widen in absolute shock as the horrifying implication of deliberate, targeted sabotage washes over him. A glowing, shattered crystal sits on a pedestal, representing the vital barrier stones that nobles use to magically repel monsters and protect the kingdom's lifeline. Connecting the terrifying dots, Zonter realizes the royal palace's sudden order to inspect all barrier stones means someone specifically targeted the Fisher family with a monster attack. Deepening his dark realization, Zonter deduces that the emergency summons for tomorrow's Nobles' Council must be directly related to this alarming sabotage. Startled by a sudden, sharp noise, both intense men snap out of their grim theorizing and look over in surprise. Louise firmly scolds her husband, reminding him that discussing such dark matters now only worries little Lulu and won't solve anything before tomorrow's official meeting. A panicking Fisher quickly apologizes for his thoughtlessness while a terrified Lulu nervously asks if something terrible is currently happening at Emma's house. Reassuring the frightened girl, Zonter gently reminds Lulu that there is no need to worry because he and the other capable adults are there to protect them. The scene sharply shifts to the Zonter estate, where the stern butler Christoph expertly drapes a formal uniform jacket over his master's broad shoulders. Adjusting the elegant fabric, Christoph proudly notes that while light armor is fine, this sharp formal wear suits the young master even better. Zonter tiredly glares over his shoulder, flatly ordering his loyal butler Christoph to immediately stop calling him young master. Rolling his stiff shoulders with an annoyed sigh, Zonter complains to Christoph that the rigid formal clothes are incredibly uncomfortable to wear. Hearing a small noise at the doorway, Zonter gently calls out to Lulu, warmly noting that she is awake quite early today. Poking her head through the slightly open wooden door, a cheerful Lulu offers a bright, energetic good morning. Stepping into the room, Lulu suddenly freezes and lets out a tiny squeak of pure shock as she beholds her father's imposing new attire. Turning his head in mild, concerned confusion, Zonter calmly asks his completely stunned daughter what is wrong. Staring upward with incredibly wide eyes, Lulu softly mentions that her father looks completely different than his usual casual self. Realizing she isn't used to this outfit, Zonter explains he is heading to the castle today and guesses she hasn't seen him in these formal clothes much. Misinterpreting her continued stunned silence, Zonter nervously sweats and awkwardly asks his daughter if the fancy outfit looks bad. Breaking into a massive, beaming smile, Lulu gleefully clarifies that she was just totally surprised by how incredibly cool he looks. Completely overwhelmed by his daughter's adorable compliment, Zonter covers his face as imaginary sparkles erupt around him, internally screaming that she is a literal angel. Cheering him on, Lulu sweetly asks him to do his absolute best at work so that her friends Emma and Lena can feel safe and at ease. Touched by her earnest request, Zonter flashes a confident, reassuring smile and promises he will handle it as he bravely heads out the door. The narrative solemnly explains that the nobility holds massive influence in the Bernard kingdom because their superior magical power gives them the heavy duty to fight monsters. A vital flashback reveals that individuals with immense magical power are dubbed saints and saintesses, who bravely travel the country annually to replenish the large-scale barrier stones. Staring out the carriage window with a serious, intense expression, Zonter silently contemplates the massive, kingdom-saving responsibility resting on the nobility's shoulders. The strict narration firmly establishes that the continued existence of powerful nobles and saints is entirely indispensable for protecting the kingdom's borders and its innocent people. A grand, ornate carriage steadily rolls toward the majestic castle looming over the royal capital, where all the heads of the noble families are currently gathering to address the major incident. Inside a massive, tiered assembly hall, distinguished noblemen slowly take their assigned seats and anxiously converse in hushed, serious tones. A voice suddenly calls out from off-panel, mockingly addressing the newly arrived Zonter by his official title of Acting Duke Layman. Zonter immediately grimaces in deep, seething annoyance, clearly recognizing the thoroughly unpleasant voice currently speaking to him. Turning his head with a strained, exasperated expression, Zonter reluctantly greets the sarcastic man, dryly noting it has been a while since they spoke. The sarcastic nobleman smirks and maliciously points out that Zonter rarely ever shows his face, sneeringly asking when they even last saw each other at an evening party. The narrative fully identifies the mocking man as Peter Bernard, head of the Duke Bernard family, prompting an annoyed Zonter to snap that he simply isn't good at socializing. Feigning sympathy while hiding a cruel smirk, Peter maliciously notes that Zonter's talented younger brother will soon succeed him, while Zonter internally admits he secretly calls the arrogant man Bernard. Standing with a strained smile, Acting Duke Layman listens as Lord Bernard pesters him relentlessly, noting their long-standing acquaintance since their academy days. Maintaining his mock-sympathetic tone, Bernard teases the acting duke, claiming he surely won't feel lonely despite his cold words. A sudden, sharp trumpet blast echoes through the hall, signaling a formal shift in the atmosphere. Glancing toward the source of the noise, Layman urgently prompts Lord Bernard to take his seat as the official meeting is finally beginning. Bernard grumbles about the unrefined trumpet call and complains that he was interrupted just as he had caught a rare person to talk to. Giving a final wave, Bernard promises to continue their conversation after the meeting concludes, much to the acting duke's clear annoyance. Gritting his teeth in irritation, Layman vows to head straight home the moment the session ends before Bernard can find him again. A herald stands at attention with a spear, loudly announcing the formal entrance of His Majesty the King. The heavy atmosphere of the royal court settles over the room as the proceedings begin. The massive, ornate doors of the assembly hall creak open as the guards stand ready. From his throne, The king commands the gathered nobles to raise their heads after acknowledging the sudden nature of the summons. The king explains that the meeting concerns the recent, alarming matter of monsters attacking Marquis Fisher's house. He reveals the grim results of the investigation, stating that the Fisher family's barrier stone was found to have been intentionally destroyed. In response to the breach, the king had ordered every noble house to urgently check the integrity of their own barrier stones. Layman is visibly shocked to learn that the sabotage wasn't isolated to the Fisher house, but that barrier stones were destroyed at several other estates as well. The king emphasizes the mystery of the situation, noting that in every damaged house, the area locks were found to be functioning normally. Layman realizes the situation is worse than expected, knowing that these magic tools should prevent all physical or magical attacks within their range. He wonders if the culprit somehow deactivated the area locks, given that barrier stones are mandatory to protect because they can be destroyed by human hands. The king explains that deactivation methods are unique to each house, ranging from wind magic seals to the accurate singing of the national anthem. Because these methods are strictly managed and often passed down only orally, any failed attempt should immediately trigger a warning to the owner. The assembly is left baffled as to how multiple locks could have been bypassed unless the secret deactivation methods were somehow leaked. Admitting there is no clear pattern or known cause for the targeted houses, the king asks if anyone has noticed anything unusual to report. Baron Hoffman raises his hand and humbly begs the king's pardon to speak. Granted permission to speak, the Baron explains that he noticed a strange commonality while speaking with other affected houses. He recounts that during a regular replacement of an area lock, the merchant who delivered the device said something very peculiar. The merchant's parting words were a specific, odd phrase, "May something very good happen to you." Hoffman realizes that every single house targeted heard this same phrase, even though they purchased their locks from different merchants. A heavy silence falls over the room before the king commands those who recognize the phrase to remain behind for further questioning. The king calls for Lord Zonter as the room begins to clear. The rest of the nobles are dismissed with orders to check with their households to see if anyone else recalls the merchant's suspicious blessing. Lord Fisher approaches Layman, addressing him formally as the acting lord of the Layman estate. Fisher admits he initially tuned out the phrase as standard merchant patronage, but now realizes his usual supplier said it as well. Layman is struck by the realization that the same merchant delivered that suspicious phrase to his family's estate too. Bernard comes rushing back toward Layman, his energetic demeanor contrasting with the heavy news. Looking worried, Bernard frets about whether his own estate will be safe while he is away, despite having confirmed the barrier stone earlier. Layman confirms with a forced smile that the merchants didn't say the suspicious phrase to his household, then asks Bernard about his own situation. The nobles are left wondering who could possibly be behind such a calculated and widespread threat. Though he wanted to chat longer, Bernard turns serious and announces he is going to head out to gather more information. With a loud laugh and a wave, Bernard makes a hasty exit, promising to meet the acting duke again at the next evening party. Layman and Fisher watch him go, the former appearing exhausted by Bernard's high-octane personality. Fisher comments that Lord Bernard is as hectic as ever before, excusing himself from the conversation. Layman wonders if his irritation was obvious, while Fisher notes that he didn't realize Layman could show so much emotion toward someone. Layman explains that they were classmates at Craigle Academy, though he still finds Bernard's persistent pestering to be quite strange. Planning to avoid future social gatherings, Layman hopes to live like a hermit and let Markus attend evening parties alone from now on. Later, at the Layman residence, a servant tries to get the acting duke's attention while he is lost in thought. The butler offers Lord Bernard a refill on his tea, which the guest gladly accepts with a cheerful smile. Layman stares intensely, find it incredibly strange that the very man he was trying to avoid is now sitting in his home. He sits on his sofa in disbelief, internally screaming as he wonders why Duke Peter Bernard is currently at his house. Bernard explains there is a huge uproar at Craigle Academy because a teacher also heard the suspicious phrase during an area lock delivery. Layman realizes the gravity of the situation, fearing that many other barrier stones might already be destroyed without anyone noticing. Layman ponders the disconnected nature of the barrier stone attacks, noting that despite the victims being far apart and using different merchants, the entire territory might require a tedious reevaluation. A sudden realization strikes him as he considers the possibility that a single shipping company might be the hidden link between the disparate victims. He reasons that while various merchants sell the area locks produced by the Magic Tool Guild, there must be a common point in their distribution. The pieces fall into place as he identifies the transporters who move the magical tools from the guild to the individual sellers as the potential culprits. He concludes that even if nobles purchased from different merchants, they could all be compromised if they utilized the same shipping company for delivery. Layman instructs his aide to have the academy head investigate the shipping lead while he prepares urgent letters to Lord Fisher and Peter Bernard. Watching Peter Bernard cheerfully praise the tea, Layman deeply regrets his decision to include the overbearing Duke in his communications. Despite Lehman's repeated insistence that a written reply would suffice, Bernard stubbornly refused and declared his intention to visit in person. After a futile three-way exchange, Layman finally relented out of exhaustion, a decision he now bitterly regrets as he releases a heavy sigh. Bernard nonchalantly questions the acting Duke about the source of his dramatic sigh, seemingly oblivious to his own role in it. Bernard defends his sudden arrival, claiming he went to great lengths just to provide a face-to-face answer to Lehman's inquiry. Clenching his fist in irritation, Layman accuses Peter Bernard of spouting nonsense and having no real intention of answering the actual question. Bernard playfully asks if his host has no interest in an information war, prompting a sharp demand from Layman for him to state his business and leave. A soft knock interrupts their bickering as Lehman's daughter asks for a moment of her father's time. The maid apologizes for the intrusion as she leads young Lulu into the room to see her father and his guest. Lulu shyly explains that she simply wanted to offer a formal greeting to her father's visitor. Though Layman finds the idea of introducing his precious daughter to a man like Peter Bernard annoying, he realizes he cannot refuse her request. Bernard reacts with delighted laughter as Layman formally introduces his daughter to the visiting Duke. Louise Zonter performs an elegant curtsy and formally introduces herself as the daughter of Wolfgang Zonter. Layman is moved by his daughter's growing grace, though he internally grumbles that such a perfect curtsy is wasted on someone like Bernard. Peter Bernard returns the courtesy, introducing himself to Lady Louise and mentioning his own title of Duke. He enthusiastically claims to be her father's longtime childhood friend and constant companion. Lulu's eyes sparkle with excitement at the mention of her father's academy days and his supposed childhood bond. Bernard doubles down on his claim by declaring himself Lehman's one and only best friend, leaving the acting Duke in complete shock. While Bernard laughs boisterously, Layman wonders when exactly he was drafted into the role of Peter Bernard's best friend. Bernard invites the young lady to join them for tea, promising to regale her with stories of her parents from their time at the academy. Lulu enthusiastically accepts the offer, eager to learn more about her parents' past. Ultimately, Bernard's storytelling proved so engrossing that he remained at the residence until the evening hours. Lulu's insatiable curiosity about the academy days of Layman and Katie kept the conversation flowing for hours. Peter Bernard patiently answered every single one of the young girl's questions, noting how quickly time flies in such pleasant company. Expressing a touch of sadness, Bernard finally announces that it is time for him to take his leave for the day. Lulu hesitates for a moment, clearly having one last request before the guest departs. When Lulu asks if he will return to tell more stories of her parents, Bernard agrees with heartfelt enthusiasm. With a bright smile, Lulu thanks the Duke and bids him a warm goodbye as he prepares to exit. Once Lulu has departed, Layman admits his genuine surprise at the Duke's behavior during the visit. He marvels at the sheer volume of details Peter Bernard remembered, noting that he must have been watching Layman and Katie very closely back then. Layman points out that he doesn't actually remember them spending much time together during their academy years. Bernard turns away with a cryptic smile, suggesting that Layman wouldn't have noticed his presence even if he had been there. A sudden, intense focus on Bernard's gaze hints at a depth of emotion hidden behind his usual boisterous persona. Bernard addresses the acting Duke by his formal title as the atmosphere between them shifts significantly. With a pointed expression, Peter Bernard notes that while Layman recalls his name, he has no memory of his actual face from the past. He leaves the question hanging in the air, challenging Layman's perception of their shared history.